Today we're going to take a look to Rider, a brief introduction to it, and some tips and tricks we can apply to Unity. But let's start with what's Rider. Rider is a .NET cross-platform IDE. It's developed by JetBrains, and it's based on the IntelliJ platform and ReSharper. What's interesting about Rider for us is that it has a great integration with Unity. This means that it will read other files rather than only scripts, and will help us develop our projects with Unity. This is just a brief introduction, but just we'll be doing this presentation with a small example on Unity, and we will start. First of all, I just wanted to introduce you some shortcuts, a couple of them, since we are going to use them on all the presentation. And I think with just a couple of shortcuts, you will be able to do almost anything on Rider. So the first of them is Control-Alt-S, that will open the settings menu. And I think this is a really important menu and shortcut, since on Rider we can configure almost everything. So it's worth to spend some time on this menu and set up the IDE as you want. Here on the key map, you can find all the shortcuts and all the actions available. So take a look and spend some time, because you can find interesting things. The next shortcut I wanted to mention is Shift-Shift. This will open this context menu, this pop-up, that's called Search Everywhere. And this will let us search for files or classes. For example, I can search for a test scriptable object. It can handle some typos. For example, you can see that it's also searching, finding this scriptable object, although I don't have any vowel. And you can filter by classes, files, symbols. But what's more important is this tab, the Actions tab, that will let us search for any action. For instance, if I search for collapse, you can see that it shows me all the collapse actions. And most important, it shows me the shortcut binded to that action. So anytime you want to do anything on Rider and you don't know how to do it, search on this menu and try to learn all the shortcuts that are already set for that action. It may become really handy, this menu. And even you can change some settings, some minor settings. If I search for block rate, for example, you can see this option that if I enable from this menu, now I have a block rate, and I can disable directly from here, instead of having to go to the settings menu, search for the specific option, and this really speeds up some settings that you want to do. And finally, the last shortcut is Alt-Enter, that will open this other pop-up. And this is contextual, so the options available here will depend on where the cursor is placed. But it's just the menu will display some actions you can do on the code under your cursor. So let's start with more things. First of all, I wanted to show the highlights, to talk about highlights. I think that JetBrains call them inspections, and basically are all the underlines on our code. That means that Rider wants to tell us something about that code. A warning, a suggestion, a refactor you can do, anything. So it's worth to take a look and see what Rider can tell us about that. And they can mean different things, and we are going to check. The first thing I think that Rider is really useful with these inspections are to integrate new C# features. Many times we write our code the same way every time, but C# is constantly updating. So Rider can help us learn new C# features that are integrated. For instance, here I have an example of something I learned thanks to Rider. In this case, I just have a private field, a serialized one. And you can see that this is underlined, this test field is underlined. So if I go and check what Rider has to say me with Alt-Enter, the Actions menu, you can see here 3 suggestions. The first is to rename it. So we won't be looking at that. The next one is to remove it, since this is redundant code. I'm not using this now. But the one I want to show you is encapsulate field. If I apply that option, I will go ahead. And you can see that Rider has refactored the code and added this field keyword. And this is something relatively new to Rider. I think it's called auto-generated property, but I didn't know about that, and thanks to Rider, I learned this. And this is just an example of many other things that you can learn with it. So, okay, we will move to more things. Runtime can read our code and will warn us of some possible runtime errors. This way, we will avoid to go to Unity, compile our code, test it, and see that something is not working properly, and speed up our code process. Some examples are here. We know that we cannot instantiate a mono behavior like this test mono using the new keyword. So Rider warns us. If I click Alt Enter, you can see that it's suggesting me to use the add component. And in fact, it will refactor the code directly for me. Simply click Enter. I'm okay with the game object. And the code is refactored. It warns us and fixes the problem immediately for us. Another example is on this case, I have a rigid body component. I never initialize the component, so I'm using this operator to check for null. But rather, you can see here on the inspection, it's telling me that this might not work, this check might not work. In this case, the fix doesn't really help, since it only suggests me to use a null check, but the problem is still there. But at least it's warning us, and not like other IDEs that I've seen. Another example of a runtime error that we can prevent is on layers and tags. You can see here I'm using this tag, this layer and this tag, but here on the inspection, you can see that it's already warning me that that tag and that layer are not set on Unity. So this code will never work on runtime. In fact, while I'm writing this line, when I start writing the string, you can see that the suggestions are only the ones that are set on Unity, in this case, the default ones. So this can prevent us some runtime errors before compiling the code. And here is just another example. I don't really know why, in this case, it's not underlined, this parent property. But you can see that I have a class called foo with a parent that it's never initialized, it's always null. And if I click Alt Enter on parent, it suggests me to refactor and check for null. Again, it should be highlighting it. I don't really know why it's not now, but the refactor applies correctly, and you can see that now I'm checking for null, and I have prevented a possible runtime error. Okay, that's with runtime. You may encounter many other examples while you're programming. These are not real case examples. It's not a real project, but it's just to show you some mirror examples. More things. Rider can help us optimizing our code. It can check some actions or some code that it's heavy on our side and can fix it or at least warn us. For example, this case, comparing a tag using this equal operator is creating some garbage. So Rider will suggest me to simply, if it works, to simply use the compare tag method and avoiding that garbage. And again, it warns us and refactors the code automatically to optimize it. Another example is this line, this position modification. This is not realistic case of, but you can see the point here. The first thing that Rider is warning us is this, that we should use a component segment to make the code a little bit clear. But it's also warning me that I should use a new variable so I can store transform and later use it, avoiding me one access to the native part of the memory. And with the same with position, I could introduce a variable, so I modify it with a stored one, and later assign it to position. This way we will avoid um, going to the native code on Unity and lost some small time that in this case, if we are doing an update, it will have a higher impact. More optimization highlights while setting properties on animators or materials. Rider suggests us to use a cache property index, and it will auto-generate it for us. Just click enter, and here you can see both properties. And in fact, if we can see the declaration here. And this will optimize a little bit our code since when we are using strings, it will always be converting to IDs. So doing by yourself will speed up a little bit our code. And these are not great optimizations, but little pieces can help a lot. And finally, this other highlight you can see on this line, you can see that it's different from the others. And this is just a warning of an expensive invoke. It's telling us that this method is expensive and it may have an impact. If we go to this method, we can see that it's simply getting a transform and returning us. But Rider knows that get component is expensive, so it propagates this warning depending on the context. You can see that I'm getting the transform each frame on the update, so this is pretty heavy. But if I get the component on the wake, there's no warning, since awake is supposed to do that. In fact, if I go to the call on update, I can open the actions menu, and you can see that it suggests me to do that on a wake or a start, and avoid that call on each frame. There might be some situations where you want, so this is just a suggestion. And let's move on. More features that Rider has is code completion. Rider can generate, I can autocomplete code for us as any other IDE. What I found, is that it has less problems finding code that it's not imported on namespace that are not imported. You can see here, I don't have the Unity editor namespace, but if I start typing editor, for example, and I want to search for the GUI layout class, it's telling me that it's on Unity editor, and I can simply press enter, and it will import for me, and the class is here, and now I can keep typing. Again, I found some IDEs that have trouble with this. And in this case, if you know the name of a class, but you don't remember in which namespace it is, this can be really handy. And the same happens with the UI namespace, for example. You can see here the button, like you can click Alt Enter and import the namespace. So let's move to the code generation. Rider can generate a lot of code for us that it's not worth to invest time since it's repetitive. Here I have another shortcut. You can open this menu with Alt Enter and go to the last option, generate code. But you can see that with Alt Enter, we can go to the final menu directly. Here you can see many options of code that we can generate. And in fact, we can generate any Unity event function. We can check. And this will depend on the context. Here we can have all the functions available on mono behaviors. We can select the ones we want. We also have a small description of what they do. And we can automatically generate with if we go on. And in fact, if we go to an scriptable object like this one, we can go to generate them, and you can see that fewer options are displayed here since it's a scriptable object. Press enter, and all the functions are already generated for us. We can also generate code inside a class. In this case, I have a simple class with one private field. And let's say I want to add a property for that field. I can simply click enter, select that field, and now I have a property. I can, for example, I want to add the dispose pattern. Simply click enter, and I have this pattern implemented. Let's say I want to add an equality comparer. Select the field, and you now have all this code generated for you automatically. So this can speed up your production quite a lot, avoiding you implement code that it's always the same and it's trivial to implement. Okay, now let's move to usages and serialization. Rider, as I said, can read other files that we've seen with tags and layers, and can know when Unity is using our code. In this case, Rider knows that start is an event function, and it's telling us with this mark. But this other method is not a Unity event function. But it's also telling us that it's used by Unity twice. And in fact, we can check which objects are using that method. And if we click, you can see that Unity opens, and we have this little window telling us that on this game object on the scene is using the method. You can see here, or the button, this UI button is also using this method. This works with prefabs and scriptable objects, as you can see here. And this can be really, really helpful, since many times you have methods that are never used, apparently, but in fact are used from Unity. And you can delete them because you think that anyone is using them and break everything. Similar thing happens with serialized fields as this. This is telling me that someone on Unity, the editor, has set this field or these two strings. In this case, this is empty by default, and no one has changed it on Unity. But this other one, it's also empty by default, but someone has set the value to hello world. And we can also check that which game object is setting it. You can see both strings here. So pretty neat. Let's move to the smart refactor. As other IDEs, we can refactor code to ensure that we change the name of something and applies where it must be applied, that change. But in this case, we have this method that it's invoked using a string. In other cases, if we refactor that method, our IDE won't notice that it's called by string, and we will break that invoke. But if we refactor this code with Control RR, and let's say we change it to method C and apply the change, you can see that this call is also updated. It will, of course, suggest us to use name of instead of a string. But pretty neat, if we want to use the string, it will automatically update it too. And you can see here that also tells me that has one usage, this method, and works too with coroutines. Another cool trick with the refactor is that we might have a private field. In this case, we have a private field that is serialized and has a property that just returns the fields, and we have a comment explaining what this field means. If you want to change this name, we may need to update the property name to reflect the changes. This serialized field might be broken on some assets. So let's let Rider handle this. I will refactor the name of that property. I will select this checkbox that will search for string literals on comments. We'll move ahead, and we can see that it's warning us that there's a property related. We can automatically update the name of that property. So let's go ahead. And it's also warning us that's a serialized file field, and it can break some assets. So we can add the formerly serialized as attribute to prevent it. And finally, the comment. Rider will update that comment for us too. So let's go ahead. And now you can see all the changes applied. The field is changed, the property too, the attribute is added, and the comment is also updated. And just with a couple of clicks. So let's move on. Let's check the compiler. I think this is one of the greatest features of Rider, and it has a built-in decompiler. We can go to the definition of any compiled code and check how it's on. By default, I think that F12 is a shortcut, but you can go with the actions menu, and you can see here how an action is set. The same works with TechNet Flow, for example. Will take a little bit more, but you can check all the code, all the C# code, of course. And the same works with mono behaviors, all the Unity code. I really found this very useful on the UI library to check what was happening. And also say that this decompiler works with the debugger. So while we are debugging our code, we can step into the compiled code and debug it also. Okay. One thing I forgot about the smart refactoring is this line here. That you know that when we have a mono behavior, the file name should be the same as the mono behavior one. So if we refactor this class name, again with Control RR, we can select this option, rename it, and it will update the file name too to reflect the changes and don't have any problem. So next one, Rider has built-in shader support. Unfortunately, it's not working now on this project, and I don't really know why, since this keyword should be highlighted. But well, just to mention. And for example, you can refactor some variables, some properties of the shaders, and will update the usages of them. Just a small warning, I found that refactoring on the code part, this scope, won't update properties on this other scope. So make sure that if you update those properties, you also update them up here. The next thing I wanted to mention is the code style. If we go to the settings menu, we can search for code style, and we can set here all the rules we want for the code style, and automatically update the code style of our code. The cool thing is that Rider can read the current project and can detect some rules specifically of that project and update the settings for us. So you can see here these auto-detected settings. That's telling me that the indent style is not the one I have set on my settings. It's reading from the code and updating the style. So you can have several projects with different code style that Rider will adapt to each project and accordingly to its code style, and yet have your own rules on your configuration. From more things, from Rider, you can perform some Unity actions, some action related to the Unity project. In fact, if you open first the Rider project, you can open from Rider the Unity editor using this button. But more things you can do is you can enter play mode with this button. You can refresh the assets with this other button. So if you want to compile the code and you don't want to move to Unity and refresh from there, or let the auto refresh act, you can click here and compile your code, and then enter play mode from Rider if you don't need go to Unity. And we can also check the console in this window. If we enter play mode, we will see all the logs from the Unity console. You can see that Unity has started playing and all the logs are appearing here. And all the call stack works too appears here, and we can go to the line we want. We can also filter all the logs with these options. So pretty more or less the same with the console and the Unity editor. And we can exit from here. This button is the one to start the debugger. And about the debugger, I won't say many things since it's pretty much the same as the Visual Studio one. I personally found that works a little bit better with coroutines than asynchronous methods, but it's just my personal experience, but just to take into account. Um, Finally, we are ending now. Just talk about the templates. We can add new files from Rider. In fact, you can see if I go to add, you can see different templates, script templates and shaders. This is similar to the Unity ones, but we can go to the settings menu, templates, and here on the file templates Unity, we can see many templates for Unity scripts, and we can set them, we can modify them really easily. We have different settings here to play with. And I think that these templates are a little bit better than the Unity ones, and are, of course, more easy to modify them than the Unity ones. A small note here with templates. We have snippets as other IDs, but Rider calls them live templates. And you can see all the C# templates, snippets. So if you want to configure your snippets, know that the name is different. And not many things. Finally, I just wanted to show you that on this tab, the Unity test under here, you can play all the tests, the unit tests you want to perform, and you will see all the results here and the description here, as you can do on the Unity. And it also works with the Unity, the player tests that are used on Unity. So pretty cool. And finally, just to show you, you can open the documentation. If you go to any Unity class, you can press Ctrl+Shift+F1, and here you can see the documentation, and open it on your browser. So this is all the things I wanted to show you. Hopefully, some of them were new for you and can help you using Rider. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will try to answer. And thank you all for your attention. Amadeus telling me if I can show the same things with Visual Studio. Sorry, I don't have Visual Studio installed here, so I can't. You mean, yeah, as Eli said, if you set for split vertically, I have the shortcut with Shift++, that it will open with both tabs at the same time. I think that there are two different actions. The split vertically will open the same tab twice. And I think there's another action to move your current tab to this side of the screen and only have one instance of it. I don't remember the name now, but I think um, sorry, I don't remember now the name, but I know that there are both actions that you can see here. Any other question? I think Rider has a Unity plugin system, and you can add different plugins. But for Unity, I haven't seen that it's necessary, and I don't really know if there are many plugins to install. On the settings menu, you can see here under the plugins option, you can manage all the plugins. But I don't really know if there are more plugins or external plugins for Unity apart from the default one. Anything else? Yes, as yes. Well, you are, as Elizabeth have said. When you open Rider for the first time, you can configure your shortcuts to match Visual Studio. So if you are more familiar with them, um, might be really useful. And just to show you on the settings menu under keymap, here you have all the shortcuts and all the actions, and you can configure here the shortcuts. And you can search by name if you need that. It's it's really necessary since there are tons of options. Okay, so if you don't have any other question, I think we are done. If you have any question anytime, feel free to open me on Discord, and I will try to help you. So thank you all.